Well, it's not just the Daily Mirror, it's at least three newspapers by my reckoning. The Telegraph and the Guardian have clearly got hold of copies of a draft copy, which is due to go tomorrow before a very unwieldy meeting of Labour's National Executive, the Shadow Cabinet, members of the National Policy Forum, some extra trade union people, probably about 80 people in all. No wonder it's leaked. Well, according to the Telegraph version, he talks about nationalising industries, Royal Mail, rail, energy companies, National Grid and so on, forcing wage caps. It's a 43-page document, says the Telegraph. Mr Corbyn talks about wanting to achieve a nuclear-free world and it says he's extremely cautious about using Britain's nuclear deterrent. Defence is an area where there's likely to be an almighty bust-up at the meeting tomorrow. Mr Corbyn says he'll only send the armed forces into combat if all other options have been exhausted. He will rule out Theresa May's no-deal Brexit. He won't set a cap on immigration, and he'll propose setting up a Ministry of Labour to give more power to the trade unions, perhaps. Pay bargaining, £250 billion of borrowing, and the income tax we know about from John McDonnell at the weekend. In the Mirror story, they talk about promises of £6 billion a year extra for the National Health Service, £1.6 billion a year for social care. Tuition fees for universities, as Mr Corbyn hinted today, will be abolished entirely. Labour will build 100,000 new council houses, and there'll be homes offered to rough sleepers. In a statement to Sky News in the last few minutes, a spokesman for Mr Corbyn has said, "We don't comment on leaks. We will announce our policies in our manifesto, which is our plan to transform Britain for the many, not the few." So the controversial bits really are the defence proposals, which of course are a source of great contention inside the Labour Party. But of course critics, the Conservatives and others, will say this is Labour's most left-wing manifesto since 1983 under Michael Foot, which as everybody knows, the late Gerald Kaufman dubbed the longest suicide note in history. One area that may be considered also is proportional representation, some form of electoral reform, possibly in a move to woo Liberal Democrat voters to get them to vote Labour in the election. So here we have a very left-wing manifesto, lots of nationalisation and some controversial statements from Mr Corbyn on defence, which will enrage not only opponents but particularly some of his critics in the party too.
Thank you, John, for that update. Now, we're joined again by our two expert guests. I mean, this is really extraordinary, isn't it? Like a full manifesto, it appears, or even if it's in draft form, being leaked to the newspapers. I mean, it must be very, very embarrassing, to say the least, annoying for the Jeremy Corbyn's Labour Party.
Well, it's bang out of order who's ever done it. Whatever you think about Labour and so on, it's whoever's done it obviously has something of a vendetta. You wouldn't do it otherwise. It's obviously beyond unprofessional on that individual's part. But, you know, we haven't had time. Obviously, we've just been sitting in the room having a chat, so I haven't seen the details of it. But what is interesting, if we're going to talk about the manifesto now, such as we know the details, is dealing with, obviously, some of the big challenges facing the country, lowest level of house building in this country since the 1920s. If there's a Department of Housing to get that housing built, that's good for the economy, because it stimulates construction and other industries. It will get people into work. It will bring down the housing benefit bill because we spend £9 billion a year subsidising private landlords. So that's just one thing I've picked up, regardless of the rights or wrongs of it being leaked, which would be a good pledge.
Joe, I mean, this is every politician's nightmare, isn't it?
Well, this is sabotage on a major scale. I mean, not only we were just discussing how could this have happened, because there's a point at which in manifesto development that you have a core team that are involved, and you'd probably have sections, policy experts who will be doing sections of the manifesto. So there must have been something going on. I don't know the rules and routes of the Labour Party, but I presume there was some sort of clearance process. This was going out to a wider audience. At that point, someone's had been brave enough to leak it. But even for the Mirror to be willing to run it at this stage when it hasn't gone through all of its final process is absolutely unprecedented. I mean, I'm really staggered that this has gone on.
Yeah,